picky eating is a normal stage of kids' development, as we figured out in the previous video. Why doesn't it look the same everywhere? Why do many parents in countries like France rarely talk about picky eating? While in countries like the US, it sometimes feels like almost every toddler is a picky eater. Today we are not just going to talk about cultural differences in food. We are going to look much deeper at the very different ways cultures introduce children to food and shape their eating habits from the very beginning. And even more importantly, what can we learn from that to help our own children enjoy a wider variety of healthy foods? Imagine two toddlers. One grows up in France. The other grows up in the United States. The French toddler might start the day with a buttery croissant and jam. Not exactly the healthiest breakfast, but by lunch they'll happily eat vegetable soup made for the whole family, followed by meat. And at dinner, fresh vegetables, fish, and even a taste of whatever cheese their parents are having. Now let's look at the American toddler. He may actually start the day with something more balanced, like eggs or whole grain toast with peanut butter. But just as often, breakfast ends up being sugary cereal, waffles, or pancakes. Another high-carb meal, much like the French croissant, but without the butter that helps slow down the rise in blood sugar. And later, meals can easily turn into negotiations. Parents offer different options, the child refuses. And dinner eventually becomes chicken nuggets, fries, or another kid's favorite. Now let's travel a little further. An Indian toddler happily eats lentils but refuses fish. A Japanese toddler enjoys fish and seaweed but may ignore fresh vegetables. An Italian toddler loves minestrone but leaves the meat untouched. Fast forward a few years, every one of these children will probably say exactly the same thing. This is normal food, even though they are talking about completely different meals. So why do toddlers around the world end up eating such different foods? This is where it really gets interesting. There are 3 reasons, and surprisingly, none of them has anything to do with genetics. Reason 1. Familiarity starts before picky eating. Remember the previous video? Toddlers everywhere go through the same stage of development. Around age 2 to 3 they develop food neophobia, a completely normal fear of new foods. They also become much more cautious about unfamiliar combinations, textures, and even foods they used to eat without a second thought. But this is where the story changes. Culture determines which foods children become familiar with before neophobia reaches its peak. Which foods appear on the family table again and again, and which foods are simply considered normal for children. No toddler is born loving sardines, lentils, or broccoli. What eventually becomes a safe food depends largely on what they see, smell, and taste during those first 2 years of life. Not because they are different children, but because they became familiar with those foods before picky eating peaked. And here is the best part. As parents, we can actually use it to our advantage. If you want your toddler to happily eat fish at 2, let them get used to seeing fish long before that. Cook it for yourself, eat it together as a family, and every now and then offer them a small taste. No pressure, just familiarity. And the second reason toddlers eat so differently around the world is that parents present food differently. Take Japan, for example. Meals aren't presented as something special or made just for the child. Children are gradually introduced to the family table through clear routines, consistent expectations, and very few alternatives. As a result, many children grow up seeing meals less as something that has to be exciting every time, and more as a normal part of everyday life. Now compare that with the United States. Kids' menus are everywhere. Many parents buy foods that are marketed specifically for children, or prepare separate meals just to make sure their toddler eats something. And those foods are often highly processed and designed to be especially appealing to young children. It all comes from a good place. Every parent simply wants their child to eat. But over time, many toddlers get used to the idea that meals should be made especially for them, and if they refuse one food, another option will probably appear. And the more that happens, the harder it often becomes to accept healthier foods that don't taste quite as exciting. It's a completely different approach to feeding children. And then there is my favorite example. France. Separate kids' menus are surprisingly uncommon outside tourist areas. Children gradually become part of the family table. They are not expected to eat everything. They are not pressured, but they are also not offered 5 different alternatives. Meals themselves follow a certain rhythm. Lunch often starts with vegetable soup. Dinner may begin with fresh vegetables while everyone is sitting together, talking, and waiting for the main course. And while the adults are chatting, hands naturally reach for the vegetables, and the children's hands too. For the French, food isn't just fuel, it's part of family life. And children develop healthy eating habits almost without realizing it. And that's another lesson we can borrow. And the third and final reason why toddlers have different attitudes towards food, different parents' expectations of how their child will eat. Here is something we rarely talk about. Parents don't just influence what children eat, they influence how children experience food. Imagine 2 families. A toddler refuses broccoli. In the first family, the parent thinks he just doesn't like broccoli, so broccoli almost disappears from the menu. Instead, the child gets a separate safe meal that they are guaranteed to eat. A year later, that child genuinely hates broccoli. Now imagine a different family. The toddler refuses broccoli, but this parent thinks toddlers reject new foods. That's normal. So broccoli quietly comes back the following week, then again and again. No pressure, no drama. Just another chance to see it. A few months later, the child eats it. The same toddler, a completely different outcome. Children aren't born knowing what's supposed to happen at dinner. They learn it from us. Remember the video where we talked about repeated exposure? Different cultures practice it without even realizing it. Some families calmly offer the same food 10, 12, even 30 times, and little by little, it becomes familiar. Others stop after the second refusal, and that food never gets the chance to become a safe food. So now you know what we can borrow from other cultures to help our own toddlers eat a wide variety of healthy foods. And before you go, tell me, where you're watching from? And what's one mealtime rule in your country that every parent just takes for granted? In the next video, we'll look at 5 simple things parents often do with the best intentions that can actually make picky eating worse. And they are all surprisingly easy to fix. See you there! Kids by Science, where proven wellness for kids meets real life.